Hey folks, welcome back to Naman Reviews. With the first season of Daredevil Reborn having recently concluded on Disney, I thought it would be a good time to review Hot Toys Daredevil from the Netflix show and Hot Toys Daredevil from the She Hulk show. Special thank you to my friend Tim for trading these two toys to me. So we're gonna do a Hot Toys Daredevil comparison in the light box, including the figures and the accessories. We'll also do some fun poses and then settle on a final score for both of them. But before we continue, may I request that you hit those like and subscribe buttons to support my channel. Here we have the two Daredevil art boxes. On the left you have the Netflix version of Daredevil, on the right you have the She Hulk version of Daredevil. Even though the Netflix version of Daredevil came out many years before the She Hulk version, the boxes are very similar in terms of dimensions, in terms of box design. For example, you can lift this or this and you'll see a window box design with the toys inside. Of course, the two boxes are very different aesthetically. On the left, you have a red and dark color scheme, very reminiscent of Frank Miller's run on Daredevil. On the right, of course, you have this yellow and brown color scheme. Disney had to go with that, even though he did that appearance for like 5 comics, I think, where he wore that costume, but Disney had to run with it. And thankfully, we are back to Daredevil's darker roots in the new Disney show. They also have different expressions on their faces. For example, here, Daredevil looks dark, mysterious, brooding. And on the right, he looks like he has just had 20 minutes with She Hulk. Not much to see on the back of either boxes, just some warnings, just some legalese, though you can see some interesting art in the background. Time to lift the lid on both of these boxes. Lifting the lid on both of the boxes reveals a very similar window box design. You even got a border over here, but the shape is a bit different, I guess. The back of the boxes are very different though. On the back of the red Daredevil box, you've got some credits. On the back of the right Daredevil box, you've got Daredevil himself in his mustard and brown glory. It's time to unbox both of these Daredevils. On the left, you have red Daredevil. You've got a battle damage faceplate, just 4 hands, weapons. You've got this thematic base, which is pretty nice actually. And you also have a very nice backdrop. On the right, you have yellow Daredevil. You don't have a battle damage faceplate, but you do have a sculpt. You do have those signature glasses, have weapons. Base is not as nice. You also don't get a backdrop, but you do get more hands. So we are going to look at the instructions just to make sure that we don't make any mistakes and break these toys. And then we're going to look at the accessories and then the figures in depth. But I can't help but take a quick peek at what we have here right now. So I'm going to be objective for the purpose of this review and put aside the fact that I do not like this brown and yellow color scheme on Daredevil. Color scheme aside, I still think, just based on first impressions, the red Daredevil is a better toy. Start with the head sculpt, and I think this head sculpt is more accurate to the actor Charlie Cox, and this sculpt does not look as good. Looks kind of bland. Not only is the expression off, but I just don't see the actor. The suit, in terms of proportions, I think this is a bit too thin. This is a bit too fat. But this is still a bit more accurate to the actor, at least on first impressions. I'm gonna have them stand and do a better comparison then. In terms of the quality of the suit, these both feel like the same suit you get on Captain America, but there is a bit more mobility than what you get with Cap, so that's pretty good. We're gonna look at the manuals now and then the accessories. I always say it's a good idea to look at the instruction sheets before you play with your toys to avoid damaging your figure. However, curiously enough, both of these instruction sheets are kind of thin and they don't cover much. For example, the red Daredevil instruction sheet just shows you how to change the faceplate and attach the weapons. And that's pretty much it. In fact, these 2 pages are blank, so kind of lazy. Of course, there are some warnings, but nothing about articulation, for example. The She Hulk Daredevil has a bit more information. Tells you how to attach the eyeglasses and how to avoid breaking them. some more on articulation, thankfully, and how to attach the weapons. So not comprehensive, but more information than the other one. Time to compare the accessories, and on the right you have the yellow Daredevil accessories. On the left you have the red Daredevil accessories. These do not include the hands that are already on the body, of course, and they don't include the bases, which we will compare separately. And of course the red Daredevil has a nice backdrop and the yellow Daredevil does not. Let's start with the hands, and it is a pity that red Daredevil does not have these expressive hands. They come in very handy for certain one-handed poses. In terms of production, I think the yellow Daredevil hands are also a bit better. On the right, you have two of the yellow and brown hands. On the left, you have the red and black hands. And you can see some silver dry brushing on the brown hands on this yellow part, just to give it that wear. And you don't really have that on the red ones. I also like the wrinkles on the brown hands. Makes it look like there is a human hand inside these plastic gloves. That being said, I do like the carbon fiber texture on the red hands, and this does not have that. I think the ability clubs have the exact same molds, but there's just a difference in the color scheme. The yellow and brown Daredevil has darker clubs, whereas the red one has slightly lighter colors. However, the yellow Daredevil has a superior wired club, and that's because this wire is very firm, so you can do all sorts of fun poses, and this is pretty loose. It just hangs. Meanwhile, this allows for some very dynamic poses. With yellow Daredevil, you get this Charlie Cox head sculpt, and with red Daredevil, you get that faceplate. And even though you just get a faceplate here, I think the likeness on it is much better. I just don't find this mold very good, and I think the paint applications are poor. There's just no complexity on it. He looks like a pale vampire. I don't think they've done a good job. But let's add the glasses and see if that helps. After putting on the glasses, the Charlie Cox head sculpt looks a bit better, but still far from where it should be. I think the mold is okay, but the paint applications really let this sculpt down. Hair does look good though, and the side profile is not bad. But straight on, it needs quite a bit of work. On the left, we have the red Daredevil base. On the right, we have the yellow one, and clearly this one is superior. The She Hulk Daredevil base is pretty standard. Nice solid material. I like the texture on it. Some texture here. This part is smooth. This has some texture. Logo looks good. But, you know, it's kind of boring. Meanwhile, this backdrop is pretty nice. Love the paint applications. Love the dry brushing. And it's also optional. You don't have to put it back here. In addition, the red Daredevil gets this backdrop, which is kind of nifty, but I mean, it's pretty huge for a DTOF. Finally, we have red Daredevil and yellow Daredevil side by side. And even though I do prefer the red costume, the yellow one is growing on me a little bit. Still, when you have these side by side, I feel like the yellow Daredevil's proportions are a bit off. He does look a bit too stocky to me. I did go back and look at yellow Daredevil in the She Hulk show, and yes, the costume is a bit stockier than the Netflix version of Daredevil, but I think Hot Toys has overdone it. If you look at the waist and thigh areas especially, there's such little shape there. Looking at these sculpts up close, I feel like the Netflix sculpt is the clear winner. I can see the likeness to Charlie Cox, but on the right, on yellow Daredevil, I just don't see that likeness. Proportions and color scheme aside, the costumes are nicely designed by Hot Toys. Great attention to detail all over the body. Even though it's not aesthetically pleasing, red Daredevil does have cuts on the boots for greater articulation. The Billy Club holsters are very high quality, and they hold the Billy Clubs in place very nicely. Since we have the portrait lens on, let's take a look at the other head sculpt for yellow Daredevil with the glasses on. A lot of people would want to buy yellow Daredevil over red Daredevil for the head sculpt, but unfortunately, it's just not a very good portrait. As mentioned before, the likeness is just not there for me, and I feel the paint applications is subpar. Interestingly, the articulation for both of these Daredevil toys is very similar, though red Daredevil has slightly better articulation because that suit is more flexible and it has a cut at the boot. Yellow Daredevil does not. But let's go through the articulation. Let's start with Red Daredevil. Head tilts left, tilts right, looks up, looks down beautifully, turns quite freely. Shoulder goes up, moves forward, back, lifts, shrugs. Very nice double jointed elbow. Hand rotates freely. Waist twists. A little bit of an ab crunch. I feel like the diaphragm twists a little bit. Thighs rotate. Double jointed knee. Leg kicks forward just a little bit, not too much because of that suit. Likewise goes back just a little bit. Lots of ankle movement. So the articulation on Red Daredevil is outstanding. Let's look at Mustard Daredevil now. Head tilts left, tilts right, turns freely, looks up nicely, looks down beautifully as well. Shoulder goes up, moves forward, not too much. Again, that suit, but this holds it back more than the red one. Goes back a bit more freely. Beautiful double jointed elbow. Cut at the bicep, just like the other one. Lifts and shrugs. And hand rotates freely. In fact, so freely that it has come off. Okay, it's back on. Waist twists. Bit of an ab crunch. Leg kicks forward a bit more than Red Daredevil. Doesn't kick back too much. Nice double jointed knee. The ankle articulation is a bit restricted though. So overall, in some areas the articulation is worse than Red Daredevil, but not by too much. At the end of the day, you can get really nice poses out of both of these toys because the articulation overall is fair. Now that we've seen the articulation and the accessories, it's time to take the figures to the toy room for some fun poses. Time for some size comparisons, and let's start with Hot Toys Punisher, who is right in the center. And I think you need to have Frank Castle if you have Daredevil. These three display very nicely together in my opinion. Now we have Hot Toys She Hulk right in the center with her boys, the two Daredevils. I think these three figures display pretty nicely together, though I think Yellow Daredevil goes more with the She Hulk figure, just because of the show I guess. Now we have Hot Toys 1973 Days of Future Past, Wolverine right in the center with his bone claws. These three display nicely together, though Wolverine does look a bit undersized. Now we have Hot Toys Deadpool right in the center, and I think these three display nicely together. Interestingly, Deadpool is a little bit bigger than the Daredevil toys. Finally, we have the Batman by InArt right in the center, and these three kind of display nicely together. I wonder who would win in a street fight between the Batman and Daredevil, at least the TV and movie versions. Just for fun and just to give you guys an idea of how big 1/6 scale figures are next to 1/12 scale figures, here are Marvel Legends Kingpin and that gorgeous Mafex Daredevil next to our Hot Toys Daredevil figures. Well, we're at the end of the review, so which Daredevil toy do I prefer? It's a close contest, but my final score for Hot Toys Daredevil from the Netflix show is going to be 4 out of 5 stars. Meanwhile, my final score for Hot Toys Daredevil from the She Hulk show is going to be 3 out of 5 stars. For Red Daredevil, the positives are a more aesthetically pleasing color scheme for the suit, battle-damaged faceplate, cuts at the boots for more articulation, and a very nice backdrop. On the other hand, Yellow Daredevil has a Charlie Cox head sculpt, glasses, wired billy club for more fun poses. However, both toys do have their flaws. For example, I think the proportions are off on both figures, while the sculpt for the yellow version is mediocre. Well, that's the end of the comparison, folks. Despite their flaws, these are still fun figures to get, especially if you like the TV shows. Hope you find what you're looking for, and hope you tune in again for more videos. And please do remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed my review.